data or under the PCT application. Then I use what is called bibliometric data, which is publications data, publications by LinkedIn Science, which is much more for basic research. And then I use some export-based measures, with, looking at the technology content of India's exports, whether that has actually increased during this period, and what is happening, and whether there has been a diversification of India's exports to more technology-intensive products and services. We have already seen that the overall domestic product itself, there has been a shift from, although the shift is only about 14%, but at least it's a shift from 0 to 14%. Okay, as far as the domestic output is concerned. Now, whether you can see a similar shift as far as exports are concerned, that's the I'm going to look at. And lastly, I will look at what is called the technology balance of payments, because this is also extremely important. Just like our balance of payments for commodities, we can also measure the technology balance of payments, and we can actually measure it. Thanks to the Reserve Bank of India's data again, we can measure it up to 2007-8. And because of the growing R&D outsourcing which is taking place in India, and of which again Hyderabad is an important center, with a number of contractors such organizations based here, and I've had an occasion privilege to visit some very interesting contract research organizations. So India's technology balance of payments have actually turned positive for the last 3 years, and in fact I will show you some data. So let me start with the US patent data. Now US patent data, you have two sets of information. One is applications, another is grants. Okay. Now, increasingly people say that one should use applications because, especially for most recent, because of the time lag between applications and grants. For most of the newer kind of technologies, one must also look into just applications data as well. And if you look at the applications data, you can see that the growth rates have been quite phenomenal. And if you look at India as a percentage of the BRIC countries, it's almost like 0.3. And India as a percentage of China, it's almost like 0.3. China is the number one in terms of applications in the US. These are, patent applications by Indian inventors in the US. Okay, applications. So you can see that there has been a tremendous increase, and in fact you can see that this explosion has actually taken place in the 1990s. Now, econometrically speaking, it is possible for you to estimate the structural break in the trend. We have done those structural break trends, and I shall show you the. And you can say in which year the break has actually occurred. So I will talk about those breaks a little later. Okay. And so for the time being, you can just agree with me that this break has actually occurred in the 1990s. The precise year in which the break has occurred, we will talk about it later. Okay. The next point is about how many is about grants, US patent grants, and you can see that the grants have also the US patent grants have also actually increased during this period. Started from very small numbers, and have actually now gone to about 546 per year. Okay. And again, when you take as a proportion of BRICS and China, India is actually comparing quite well. Okay, with both. So both applications and grants have actually increased. Now let me come immediately to the relationship between the two, because as I told you, there is actually a time lag between applications and grants. Okay, you apply for it in year T, you get your patent after T plus n number of years, and the value of n is taken as 2. This is the average for the US. So anyone who applies for a patent in the US gets the patent granted in about 2 years' time. Okay. So then if you actually relate the applications and patents, the patents which are applied for and patents which are granted with that 2-year lag, so that's what has been done. So the red line, if you go to the patent grants, then what you find is that the two were actually coinciding almost up to the late 90s. After that, you can see a divergence between applications and grants. In other words, the success rate is actually coming down. Okay, so the grants here, that the red line, is actually a lagged one. Okay, so applications in 2000 are related to the grants which are prepared in 2002 and so on. Okay, so that's how it's been drawn. And So the divergence between the two graphs actually shows that the failure rate in applications are actually increasing. Okay, it's becoming more tough to get patents abroad. And now this is a very good thing for the simple reason that the US patent regime itself had become a little bit easier since the late 1990s because of two innocuous changes which have taken place in the US patent office, patent and trademark office. It had become easier to secure a patent. And many companies have actually secured frivolous patents. Okay? And for instance, there was a well-known case of a patent for swimming on a swing and so on. Okay? And Encyclopedia Britannica, for instance, tried to take out a patent on searching the encyclopedia, for instance, and the kind of simple search that we do, even in a PDF file, for instance, you can search for a word, and you can try to take out a patent for that kind of. So those are frivolous innovations, and this could be done in the USPTO. But what you can see is that as far as India is concerned, it has become much more tough. This patenting has become much more tough after this period. So this frivolousness or in Indian patents is not that much reflected in the patents data as far as India is concerned. Now, if you go back and to the previous data, so just the next one. So that gives you the structural breaks in both applications and types. And when you do the economically speaking, you find that the structural break in applications are actually big. What I mean by structural break is that statistically speaking, when did the patents start increasing phenomenally? Okay, so that's what we are trying to say. So when people say that since 1991, India's economy has started improving, can you say, statistically speaking, is that the year in which the break in the trend has actually occurred or not? So if you take applications, you find that structural break is at if you take the long time series data. See, to do this, you have to require very long time series data. So I'm actually taking the data from 63 to 2007, so about 45 years of data. So you can see that in terms of applications, the breaks have actually occurred at 3 different points. And the one break has actually occurred in 1992. So it roughly coincides with the period of liberalization that we are talking about. Okay? But in terms of grants, what is interesting is that the real structural break in the post-liberalization period happened only in 1997. Okay? And that's very interesting because 1997-2000 year is also a year in which you find a lot of things going on. In fact, even overall growth rates and so on are actually, because the liberalization in our country has been ad hoc, unstructured, piecemeal, and so on. So you can't take just one particular year and then look before and after, because things have changed and become easier over the years. Okay, so I think so. This structural break analysis actually confirms that particular point. Now, if you look at the growth rates, you can see that both in terms of applications and in terms of grants, the fourth period, which is the last period, the growth rates have been quite phenomenal, more than 30% or so. The growth rates have been quite phenomenal, almost 32% in the case of applications and about 28% in the case of grants. So you have a clear-cut case of innovations increasing if you use the US patents data during this period. A clear-cut case. Okay, there's no two questions about it as far as this is concerned. Now, this still doesn't really prove whether whether India is really becoming innovative or not, because it is possible for multinational companies to do research here and take patents based on the research here, and those patents will still be classified as an Indian patent because if the first named assignee is an Indian, then it is assigned to India. Okay, so we need to cross-classify the data and find out how many of these Indian patents issued in the US are actually owned by multinational companies, and how many of them are actually owned by real Indians like us, okay, India, or private sector companies, or by CSI laboratories and so on. So again, some interesting results are coming out. What you find is that if you look at, and here I conduct analysis only for grants, not for applications. Okay, and especially when you have a failure rate in grants is increasing, so using the applications data can exaggerate the results. So and we don't know the differential failure rate between multinational companies and local companies. So I'm using grams as the indicator for measuring. And what you find is that if you take 1991, multinationals accounted for only about 5% of the total number of Indian patents. Okay, only about 5%. And that has now gone up to, I'm sorry, what is it? I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Multinationals accounted for about 29% of the patents which were issued to Indians. Okay. 71 were domestic patents. Domestic patents meaning private sector enterprises, individuals, and CSIR laboratories, basically the government research institutes. Very few public sector enterprises, are hardly one or two, okay, which has actually taken US patents. I think BHN and Indian Oil Company. I think these are the only two PSCs which have actually taken patents in the US. Okay, none of the other companies have taken any patents at all, at least based on the US patents data. Okay, and then so it was 29%. Now, interestingly, by 2007, that share has increased from 29 to 67. So approximately 2/3 of the Indian patents which are secured by so-called Indians in the US are actually multinational companies operating from India, doing research in India, and taking patents based on that research here. Okay, and concomitantly, the share of the domestic sector has fallen from 71% to 39%. Okay, so although based on the US patents data, India is becoming more innovative. Immediately you are able to realize that a lot of those innovations are actually done by multinational companies operating from India, and not so much done by Indian companies as such. I think this point also will have to be borne in mind, because otherwise we tend to congratulate ourselves too much on the wrong side. Okay, and I think this is and what is interesting is that the CSIR has been a very important contributor to US patents during this period. But the share of CSIR patents have actually gone down in the recent period, as can be shown by the next graphic. And where you can see, you can see that the CSIR has, the number of patents which are granted to CSIR has reached a maximum around 2,000 or so, and since that it has actually gone down. Okay, these are not growth rates; these are absolute numbers of the number of patents which are granted. The share of CSIR, and the line which is shooting up is the multinational companies. Okay, and then you can see that the domestic private sector companies are slowly increasing their share as well. Okay, so you have a very interesting trend here about CSIR, which has actually been a mainstay of pulling the domestic innovation. Something has happened since 2000, and where the rate of patenting seems to have gone down. Okay, and is that to do with the I don't know what exactly is the reason. Is that to do with the Mashelka strategy petering out? Because the Mashelka strategy, which was the Vision 2020 strategy of CSIR to hold a certain minimum number of patents, you can see that if you look closely at the US patent data, you can see that the CSIR had started becoming very active from 1997 or so. In fact, that's a break in the trend I showed you earlier. And applications 1992, but grants 1997. So something like the Mashelka strategy seems to have been, but that's just a hypothesis. One needs to verify that whether what's the reason as to why the CSIR patenting is actually going down. Okay, this is something which I think we need to look at, and we need to look at the data a little bit more closely as to what's happening. Now, if you take the domestic sector, then what you find is that if you take the domestic private sector enterprises, and if you take the multinational companies, who are these domestic private sector enterprises which are actually taking out patents from India? Okay, because in the previous graphic I showed you that the share of the domestic private sector enterprises is actually going up. Who are these? And in fact, if you run through the list of 23 companies, this is cumulative from 1965 to 2007. Okay, which is the latest year for which such data are available. And you have 23 companies which have been active in US patenting, and almost all the 23 companies you can see are from the pharmaceutical area. Okay, of course you have TCS coming with about 5 patents quite recently, and maybe there are 1 or 2 other companies, non-pharmaceutical companies, which are coming there. But by and large, most of these 23 private sector companies are again from the pharmaceutical companies. Please remember that particular data that I asked you to keep with behind the back of your mind, which is the R&D expenditure. There again, you saw that it is the pharmaceutical companies which are actually spending. So they are also not only spending on R&D, but also taking out patents. So in output indicators also, they are actually showing a very high share. Now, in the MNCs which are operating from the country, it's again very interesting. There is a statistical regularity there as well. You find that the number one is Texas Instruments, and then IBM and so on. And in fact, almost all of them are from the IT-related areas. Okay, so almost all of them are actually IT-related. So you find an extremely interesting picture which is coming, that domestic companies are focusing on pharmaceutical technologies, and multinational companies are focusing much more on IT-related areas. And very few domestic companies, as well as the IT companies, active in patenting. TCS is the only one. Of course, IT companies would say that patenting may not be a very good indicator for measuring the innovation. Well, we can discuss that a little later, whether that's really the case and so on. Now, if you look at again, technology-wise, the areas in which we are actually patenting, that is technology-wise if you take. And you can actually conduct this analysis from 1963 to 2007. And I just took the data from 2003 to 2007. But the sectoral distributions don't change. In fact, two classes, 532 and 424, these are US patent classification classes. Okay? So 532 is organic compounds, and 424 is drug, bioaffecting, and body treating compositions. So these are basically pharmaceutical technologies. Okay? So you find that most of the Indian patents are actually in pharmaceutical technologies. So again, the same data that the same statistical regularity that we found, again you can see. Now if you look at the which means there is some sort of specialization as far as innovations are concerned. You can see that chemicals and pharmaceuticals used to be the area in which India was actually specializing in terms of innovations. Okay, 50% in 1980, almost 45% in 1991, come down to 30% by 2007. Okay. On the other hand, an area where innovations are actually now increasing all of a sudden is in the area of IT-related areas. Okay. And we have already seen that that's a very recent phenomenon. For instance, 1991, you had zero patents in IT-related areas. Zero is not because you didn't have the data, but you didn't have a single US patent in IT-related areas. And so you can see that multinational companies have now become so the effect of R&D outsourcing. Okay, basically the IT-related areas, you can easily see that here. And telecommunications is again another area in which a lot of research is being done by multinational companies. These are not zero patents. These are the research done by multinational companies using Indian organizations like Wipro and others, and taking out patents in their own name. Okay. Say for instance, Nortel Networks, Canadian company, would do contract a piece of research to Wipro, and then take out a patent in their own name, and that would get classified here. And we had our government establish a Center for Development of Telematics in 1985 to develop a family of digital switching systems. And after some time, that particular laboratory was not allowed to proceed further in terms of its logical conclusion. Okay? And now it has become a kind of a contract research organization to certain multinational companies, and so on. Okay? And please remember that communications and telecommunications was an important growth area. Okay? And that is the fastest growing segment within India's economy. The growth rate of the communications sector is something like 25% per year. Okay? And it contributes something like 11% of India's GDP. So if we take the 9% of India's GDP last year, 1% of that comes from communication sector alone. Okay? And the market for telecommunication products is so huge in our country. And just imagine the kind of innovative capability that we would have been able to have if zero kind of organizations were actually allowed to go to a logical conversion. Again, I did some further analysis on this competitiveness about these technologies. We economists tend to measure competitiveness in terms of what is called revealed technological advantage. This, just to tell you, is a kind of a weighted market share. And if the value of this revealed technological advantage indices are greater than 1, then you would say that the particular activity is competitive. If it's less than 1, it's not competitive. So I took these two areas where Indians are actually patented, that 532 and 424, as you have seen earlier. These are both pharmaceutical technologies. And we are extremely competitive in these two areas, because you can see that the RTAs are significantly greater than 1. Okay? That 1 is that horizontal line which is parallel to the x-axis. And so significantly greater than 1. But the RTAs are coming down. So competitiveness seems to be going down over a period of time, and that's worrisome. Okay, that's worrisome. Again, I don't know whether this is something to do with the CSIR not being too active in patents. I think that may be one of the reasons. Okay. Now, so about the US patents data, the major conclusions that can be drawn is that India has certainly become innovative since 1991, but Indian innovations are concentrated by and large only in the pharmaceutical and IT related areas. And in the pharmaceutical, it's private companies, and in the IT related areas, it's basically multinational companies. So to make a comment like whether India is becoming innovative, since it's become increasingly difficult. Okay, the Indian pharmaceutical industry is becoming more innovative, and the Indian IT industry, operated by multinational companies, are becoming more innovative, and not India as a whole. Okay, so I think that's the kind of work. Again, trial patents, you find that the numbers are small, but you can see that the growth rates are very high, and this is picked up in the next slide, where India and China has shown the highest growth rate. Unfortunately, trial data, patent data are not available since 2005. 2005 is the latest year for which data are available. This is compiled by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And you can see that India and China are showing the fastest growth rates in trial patents during this period. Of course, one can argue that this is due to a low base. We start from something small, growth rates can be very large because of the low base and so on. Okay. Again, PCT applications, the numbers by Indian entities have been individuals and legal entities. Legal entities are basically companies have been growing. And if you look at the distribution, industry-wise distribution, again, you will find that pharmaceutical technologies are actually dominating. In fact, almost all the PCT applications from India are by pharmaceutical companies and so on. Patents granted to Indians and foreign inventors by the Indian Patent Office, which is the last indicator as far as patents are concerned. Again, you see a kind of increase. For instance, average patents have increased tremendously, 5% per annum, pre-liberalization period, 21%. But what is interesting is that the ratio of Indian to foreign patents, most of the patents which are actually issued by the Indian Patent Office are actually to foreigners and not to Indians. Okay, and the ratio of Indians to foreigners have actually gone down, and it is now reporting about foreign. It has virtually remained same. Okay, if you take the post-liberalization period, it's virtually remained same. Okay. So the Indian companies are not becoming very innovative if you use that data. Again, if you look, you will find that most of the patents are again in chemicals and drugs related area. These are patents which are issued to both foreigners and Indians in the Indian Patent Office. Okay. So, using the patents data, the conclusion that we could draw is basically what I just stated a little earlier. It's that although innovations have increased, it's concentrated in the pharmaceuticals and IT-related areas. By and large, if you take overall, it's basically multinationals are using the resources from here and so on. Now, if you use bibliometric data, again you find that the number of publications, very interesting picture. If you take 1980, 90 for instance, you find that India had much larger number of publications than Chinese, for instance. If you compare that with China, okay, much larger. Okay. But if you look at the latest year, 2006, you find that India has increased, the share has increased, but look at the increase of the Chinese. Okay, the Chinese have gone from less than 1,000 to 75,000 publications. Okay, and so that's the real. So in terms of bibliometric data, also the Chinese are doing much better in than the Indians as far as publications and so on are concerned. Now, if you take the high impact journals, okay, 3 journals have been given, and this is, by the way, done by a study done by a man called Prof and others who work in the Office for Naval Research in the United States. Okay, and they've done this detailed study, and these data are actually taken from that report. And if you take these 3 journals, Journal of the American Chemical Society, the Physical Review Letters, Journal of Biological Chemistry, you find that although both Indians and Chinese are actually publishing, the number of publications are not very high. Okay? If you look at there's no clear trend as far as publications are concerned. There's no clear trend. Okay? It's basically fluctuations. So that's so you cannot talk in terms of any growth rates. Now the last indicator, which is basically the exports, technology content of exports. And what you find, the first thing that you find is that India's exports have changed from exporter of commodities to services. That's the first thing that you have seen. In fact, about 40% of India's exports right now is services and not commodities. Okay, so India is increasingly becoming a service exporter and not a commodity exporter. So this particular point would have to be borne in mind. And within the service exporter, I have actually tried to measure knowledge-intensive services. These are basically IT-related services, R&D services, architecture, engineering and technical services and so on. Again, it's possible for you to do that from the detailed banks of labels table, which is compiled by the Survey of India, which is the only available official source of data. And you can see that the share of knowledge-intensive services have actually increased, which is a green line, which is going down. You can see that the share is given in the red line on the top, because this particular chart has 2 y-axes. Okay, the right-hand side is the share, the left-hand side is the absolute values. So first of all, there has been a diversification from commodities to services, and within services to knowledge-intensive services. So there is a clear indicator of improvements there. And India has now become the largest IT service exporting country in the world. Okay, in 2007, India is the largest, and the next competitor is Ireland. Okay, and the difference between India and Ireland is almost as much as about $10 billion. Okay, the only other developing country which is coming out in the services is China. Okay, and China has got about 4.3, is number 10 in terms of services. But this is extremely interesting, because if you were to do the same graph last year, China was not in the top 10. But all of a sudden it has come to occupy the 10th position. Okay, so again, they are fast catching up in services as well. So we have this eternal statement that we are very good in services and China is very good in manufacturing. But you can see that Chinese are also catching up as far as services are concerned. Of course, we are also catching up in manufacturing in certain specific areas, pharmaceuticals, auto parts, and so on. So there is some catching up happening there as well. And if you look at telecommunication services, for instance, from Norway, India has become the 4th largest exporter in the world. These are telecom services, not equipments. Okay, services, India has become the 4th largest exporter in the world. So that's again another interesting. But this has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because if you have large countries with large migrant population, okay, can tend to make telecom services can be exported, because you have a lot of conversations take place between India and abroad. So that should not be taken just like that, because you can see that Mexico, all those countries which are Morocco and all these countries which are ranking very high on telecommunication exporting are countries with very large migrant population. So Kuwait, for instance, okay, it's not that the Kuwaitis have a very good technology intensive telecom sector, because of the expatriate population is very high here, and the telecom services exports can be very high. Now, if you take the manufactured exports, okay, what is called the manufactured exports, and break that into 3 categories: low tech, high tech, medium tech, and high tech. Okay, and using certain OECD definitions and applying that to international trade data, you find that the share of high tech manufactured products from India has also increased from 5% to about 9%. Okay, that has actually increased. So the high tech content of India's manufactured products also have increased, and this is interesting to look at, because we have never been good in manufactured exports, but slowly we are beginning to be good at this. And if you break this high tech into its various components, you see that again pharmaceutical comes there as an important component. The equivalent share for China would be about 25%. Where we have 8.72, China's share would be about 25%. China was almost zero in 79 in terms of high technology. And they are focusing much more on telecom equipments. China has become one of the world's largest exporter of telecom equipments. 22% of the world's share in telecom equipments is actually accounted for by Chinese companies. Okay, and that's a very interesting. Now coming to the last indicator which I will use, which is difficult to be interpreted as well. You require some creativity for interpreting this figure, is the technology balance of payments. So if you look at the last column which is there, the TBOP column there, which is in billions of US dollars, you find that since 2005-06, India's technology balance of payments have turned positive. Okay, it increased suddenly to a very large 1.5 billion, and thereafter it came down to about $50 million per year. Okay, so even though it's small, it's positive. That's very interesting thing to say. But for a very long period of time, we have had a negative technology trade balance as far as technology is concerned. And there are very few countries which have got positive technology trade balance. And India has now joined, essentially because of the growing R&D services and architectural and engineering technical services which are being done here. So these services are done by Indian entities and they export these services abroad. So that those should also be added to India's exports of technologies. And so when you sort of summing up on the innovative activity here, basically what you find is that overall research intensities have not increased, but industrial R&D expenditures have actually increased, largely expended by pharmaceutical private sector firms. Patenting, which if you look again, there has been a tremendous increase in US patenting, but again largely increasingly contributed by multinationals operating in IT-related areas. Indian companies are active, but only in the